Story 1. I'm a valet driver turned car thief. I quit over what I found in this truck's back seat. On my taxes, I'm a valet parking lot attendant, but I pay my bills cloning keys, planting trackers, and snapping Polaroids of every high-value car that rolls onto my lot. At the end of each week, I turned over a scrapbook of easy-to-steal rides to the man in the black Bronco. His crew is patient, waiting weeks or months to make their move. By then, the victim has forgotten all about me, the common thread linking these cases together. I get a hefty finder's fee for each successful score, paid via an envelope, stuffed in my glove box. "You better sock that away," my coworker Loretta said when she caught me counting my cash. I remember almost dropping the envelope. "Easy there, Jumpy. You think you're the first valet to pad their pockets with a little something extra on the side?" She snorted. "I'm just warning you is all. You're only good for so many cars. Too much FaceTime. Then he'll either cut you loose or ask you to do the stealing." "I'd never," I said. "That's too risky." Loretta clicked her tongue. "You got it backwards. You've got the easy job, not the safe one. Your face is the one everybody remembers." I didn't believe her. I had a new loft in the Canal District with a shitload of cash on hand. That's enough to make most 24-year-olds feel invincible. But of course she was right. Her words started to eat at me. I got nervous, tried to avoid meeting the owner's eyes when they dropped off luxury vehicles, but I think that made the problem worse. I felt sweaty every time I reached for my camera or wired in a bug, and started dreading the days the next Rolls-Royce rolled onto my lot. In short, I was off my game. A few months after, as predicted, my illicit employer tried to cut me loose. It was the first time I'd seen him standing outside of his jet black car since the day we met. He looked rail thin, the kind of skinny you get from a serious coke habit, with a crooked smile and a few golden teeth. "Been good doing business, but it's time you move on," he said. At that point, I could have bought a house with the cash I'd bothered to launder down at the Riverview, but that's the thing about easy money. Once you've got a taste, it's hard to walk away. Screw pride and forget caution. I begged, "Come on, it's going so well." "That's the best time to walk away." He clapped a hand on my shoulder. His grip was tight and bony, sending my hair on end. "Sorry, kid. Too much FaceTime. Someone is bound to remember you." What if I do, the other stuff?" He lowered his sunglasses and his voice. "You don't mind getting your hands dirty?" I did. "No, not at all." "I don't know, kid. I'm thinking of getting out of the export biz, truthfully." He scratched at his bicep, mindlessly. "More feds sniffing around the dock every day. Maybe we change gears a while. Go high volume, mid-value," I said. "The kind of stuff that would set a family back. But you wouldn't think twice if you saw one on the road. We could ship those out domestically. And who's gonna clone keys, snap pics? Half these guys already did work for me." "Milton," I volunteered. "He's desperate." The recent hire at the valet stand had a baby face and a pile of student loans he could never hope to pay back with his degree. "Milton," my boss repeated. "Yeah, I think I've seen him once or twice." "Yeah," he nodded. "Yeah, that could work." In exchange for a bigger cut, I quit my legit job to start stealing full-time. Boosting rides was easy when you knew exactly where the car was and had a copy of the keys. Even still, I could never eat before a job. Shook like a leaf every time I slipped on my gloves and into the driver's seat. Somehow the issue wasn't losing my nerves, it was finding my conscience. My boss firmly believed knocking off other criminals was way more trouble than it was worth. If I stumbled on something unsavory, I was under orders to wipe the key, burn the picture, and forget the tracker. But I couldn't forget what I saw in the back seat of my last mark. The job brought me to the edge of the county, some tiny fishing town with a mercantile store, a diner, and not much else. Tracker data told me this guy made a trip out there twice a week. I tailed him to the town's only inn, right above their only bar. I never considered why he might have been going. I just waited for the lights upstairs to go out before I made a move on the truck. I climbed up inside the souped-up F-250, shaky as ever, and turned her over. These new engines all start so quiet, I hardly have to worry about rousing anyone. As always, I ignored the backup camera, twisting around in the front seat to see out the back windshield. If it hadn't been for this old habit, I never would have seen him. A thick tarp covered the space between the rows of seats, where the passengers would put their feet. That by itself, in a work truck, wouldn't have been cause for alarm. What gave me pause was the lock of greasy brown hair poking out from underneath. The rigid covering had gotten bunched up, allowing me to peek underneath from my vantage point. An eye stared back at me, bloodshot and vacant. Was there really someone laying in the back seat? Hello? The eye didn't so much as blink. I patted the top of the tarp. It was hard and cold against my palm. Still, the eye didn't blink. I reached into the back seat, taking the tarp between my thumb and finger, and lifted it ever so slightly. There was a body, eyelids wide, mouth agape. In the light from the street lamp, I could recognize the features. It was Milton. But how? Why? The car hadn't even been stolen. Did they find the bug? See him clone the key? The more I sat there, hyperventilating, the less those questions seemed to matter. I reached under the steering column and yanked out the transponder, the device that Milton may have been killed for planting. I switched the car off and closed the door as quietly as I could and got the hell out of there. 20 minutes later, I was standing at the first payphone I could find, hand hovering over the buttons. I knew the rules, what I was supposed to do, but I couldn't let it go. I called in the anonymous tip, then left when I heard sirens. Cops have beaten us to cars before. We had a procedure, plus a plant in the local PD. The pickup crew I was meant to deliver the car to would be quietly waved off, the rendezvous canceled. The next time I saw my boss, in a certain manner of speaking, was on payday, when the envelope in my glove box was heavier than usual. Instead of cash, I found a stack of pictures. A few were of family and friends. Some shots showed me, relaxing at home. Others depicted my meetings with the man in the black Bronco. A red X covered his face. The final picture looked like it had been taken from the second floor of the inn, through one of the windows I'd been sure were dark. I saw myself, halfway out of the pickup truck. "Snitch" had been scribbled on the photo. The envelope still has some weight to it. I turned it upside down with a shaky hand. A pile of golden teeth, crusted with dried blood, fell into my palm. That was about an hour ago. I'm trying to think through my next move and open to any advice you might have. Story 2. Don't get out of your car late at night, no matter what tries to stop you. When I was a 17-year-old moody teenager, I had a big argument with my mom one night about how she just didn't understand my needs and stormed out of the house. I was going to go for a walk, but it was freezing outside and really dark, so I did a quick walk of shame past my mom and grabbed my car keys, giving her a quick explanation of going on a Macus run, before storming out yet again, giving the door a nice slam on my way. I jumped in my terribly old and crappy bright red Suzuki Swift and cranked the heat which made the engine scream in protest. I turned my angry teen music up and pulled out onto the dark streets. I drove to McDonald's in about 10 minutes and decided I was too mad to eat, and to calm down, I would go on a nice drive. Just down the road another 15 minutes was a stretch of pitch-black windy road that had lots of hairpin corners as it ran down a massive gorge to a small lake with a single-lane bridge going across it. If that doesn't sound scary enough, the road was called the Galston Gorge. Fun facts, and you can Google this road. It's in Sydney, Australia. James Gibson's camera was found on this road. He was one of Ivan Milat's victims, the dude Wolf Creek was inspired by and one of Australia's worst serial killers. So it has a pretty creepy background and therefore is completely deserted at night. As I was making my way down the gorge, which is a road I know very well as I learnt to drive on it with my mum, she took me a lot at night to learn night driving on a difficult road. I turned a hairpin corner, and as my headlights swung around, it lit up the road ahead, and I saw a black medium-shaped object in the middle of the road. It made me jump, but I assumed it was just a dead kangaroo. As I continued ahead, the closer I got to this object, I realized as I was almost on top of it that it was a baby car seat with the front covered in a blanket. I hit my brakes, and my car screamed in protest even louder. I sat in my seat, staring at this baby seat, clenching my steering wheel. No way I was getting out when it was probably just a broken and dumped booster seat. I was about to pull off when I heard a noise. I turned my music down, but the sound of my shitty car engine made it hard to locate or recognize the noise. I wound my window down an inch and listened. It was a fucking baby crying. No, crying is an understatement. This poor thing was screaming.
I threw my seatbelt off and unlocked my door, grabbing the handle, then I froze. Out of the corner of my eye in the bush, I thought I saw something move. It was just out of reach of the light from my headlights. I took my hand off the door slowly and sat back into my seat, thinking. I remember my mom telling me to never stop my car at night, that if I see something that requires help, then to move on and call for professional help, because there's nothing that requires the help of a moody, short little blonde girl who can barely carry her school bag. A baby needs my help, a tiny, defenseless baby. What if that was a wild animal I saw in the trees coming to have a meal out of this little thing? I thought before I opened my car door. As I did, my car let out a screech, causing whatever it was in the trees to jump. I slammed my door closed, jumping back in and sped up the road. I got a few hairpins back up the gorge before pulling out my phone. Still no signal as I'm driving in a literal hole. I raced up to the top and back into busy streets, then called for police. I told them what I saw, and they told me to go home immediately, not to stop whatsoever, keep my doors locked, and they would call me tomorrow, but not to worry. The next morning, Hornsby police called me thanking me for my report. They said a group of men have been placing baby seats in the middle of empty roads, covering them with a blanket which hides a speaker playing the sounds of children in distress to try and lure young women out of their cars. They then drag these women away and take advantage of them and beat them. Then driving away in the women's car, leaving their victim to die in the bushes. They checked out the gorge, but the people had left. They left in such a rush they forgot the blue baby blanket with little gray elephants on it that I had described to the police as the one covering the baby seat. They said I was clever to keep going and to never get out of my car late at night no matter what tries to stop me. Edit. My partner and I might go for a drive along this road some night this week so I can take some photos of the place so you can get a visual idea of how creepy it is. I'll make sure the doors are locked. Story 3. Don't sleep in your car. About 10 years ago, when my husband Eric and I were still living in Virginia, we were traveling back home after visiting my family up north. We crossed the state line into Virginia at about 11 p.m. and decided that we needed to take a break from driving because neither of us could stay awake any longer. We saw a sign for a rest area and decided to pull off there. We both reclined our seats and within minutes fell asleep. 30 minutes later, I woke up because my arm had fallen asleep. I shook away the pins and needles and started to close my eyes again when I saw a peculiar-looking man sitting on a bench just outside of the restrooms. He was wearing dark jeans, a black hoodie, and sunglasses, despite it being nearly midnight. I couldn't tell for sure because of the sunglasses, but it seemed like he was looking right at me. I decided he was probably nothing to worry about and tried to go back to sleep. After about 15 minutes of trying to get some sleep, I gave up. I opened my eyes and sat up. The man was no longer sitting on the bench. I assumed he left. I was wrong. I looked out the window and noticed a dark figure move behind a tree that was maybe 30 feet from the side of our car. It was the man. At this point, I was getting a little creeped out, so I woke Eric. I told him about the man, and he looked out the window, but the man was gone. He disappeared completely. Eric lazily told me it was probably nothing to worry about, and immediately fell asleep. I sat there for a while longer, still trying to sleep. I was so exhausted. I was finally about to drift off when I saw the man walking straight towards our car. I made sure the doors were locked and urgently woke Eric again. He rolled down his window and confronted the man. "Do you need something, mister?" "I was hoping one of you would have a cell phone that I might be able to borrow. Payphone ain't working, and my car broke down," replied the man. He had a raspy voice and a thick southern drawl. Eric lied and told him we didn't have cell phone service. The man let out a sharp, annoyed sigh and stopped approaching the car. He was standing fairly close. I noticed that he had very striking features: smooth, dark brown hair and very defined cheek and jawbones. After a few seconds of just standing there, his face went blank and he started to walk towards the car, much faster this time. Eric immediately put the key in the ignition and sped off. At the time, we didn't know what this man's deal was, but a few weeks later, Eric and I were in the kitchen making dinner with the local news playing in the background. I heard the alert noise that our news station used when there was breaking news. I decided to watch, and as soon as I looked at the screen, my body went cold. There was a picture of the man who had been watching us at the rest area. Captioned underneath his picture was, Serial killer caught and arrested. The reporter went on to say that this man has killed at least 8 people, possibly more. He targeted people sleeping in their cars. After his victims were sound asleep, he would break out a window and kill them by slitting their throats. We were almost his next victims.